Now, let me welcome you to our discussion today. It's a single issue topic discussion, a new voters register or not. But why not? The EC is here, and we invite you to send in your questions so that they can answer them. My guest this morning, Bright Simmons. He's Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa, and here also representing the 18 CSOs that have issued a statement declaring the EC's position as deficient. Good morning and welcome, Bright. Great. We ended Newsfile with you, and we are starting with you again.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Also here is Dr. Srebo Kwaku. Dr. Srebo Kwaku. He is Director of Electoral Services, Electoral Commission. Doc, good morning and welcome to Newsfile. Having, take us through very briefly the weaknesses or the challenges in the existing system and what the new system is and what it offers. So, that is how we are beginning this morning, so that we get to know how exactly the EC claims that it is going to save the taxpayer a whopping over 173 million if it took the path of a new, completely new system rather than an upgrade.
Thank you very much, Samson, and a good morning to you and your listeners. I think that this week there's been a lot of discussion around this very same topic that we are discussing this morning. And I think that the general public, civil society, everybody has been interested in this process.
Sorry, I skipped something,
yes,
which is very important to us. So this year we'll be doing some single issue discussions on the show. We may do just 2 issues, we may do just 1 issue. But once we're doing that, we will have our guests take the opportunity to give us some small commentary by way of some news review of the issues that dominated the headlines. So forgive me, that's where we start. And very briefly, in 3 minutes, each one of you, what's the issue you chose?
Well, I mean, I would have loved to have spoken about this electoral register.
Yes, I know. We're going to do that. You have a lot of time for that.
For me, one of the things that caught my attention was the road traffic accident that occurred at Dampoa Senior Commander. And it's a very tragic incident that happened. And it's something that, if you listen to news closely, it's something that is a recurring theme. It happens over and over and over again. And it beats my imagination that as a nation, we are not taking the appropriate steps to ensure that we sort of reduce these incidents from happening. I mean, in looking at the news articles, I did a general search to see what was happening worldwide. And if you look, the WHO reports that about 1.35 million road traffic accidents occur every year. This rate, which leads to death, this is actually higher than the HIV, malaria, and TB rates, death rates that occur worldwide. Plus, majority of it actually occurs in low-income countries. The irony of it all is that only 1% of the vehicles that we have worldwide actually we have them in the low-income countries. And yet 13% of road traffic accidents related deaths occur in our part of the world, compared to the high-income countries that have about 40% of the vehicles in the world. The death rate from road traffic accidents is only 7%. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the difference between us and them? And for me, there are a couple of things. It's regulation, better routes, and public awareness as to the effects of road traffic accidents. And I think that is what we as a nation should be looking towards to ensure that we at least reduce the rates of road traffic accident-related deaths in this country.
Doc, you also chose the same issue to comment on. So what's your comment about it? I mean, the recurrence. Some of us are really getting fatigued discussing some of these issues.
Thank you, my brother. I would link it to the economic effect of such accidents. We are losing a lot of our labor force through that. we are losing a lot of people who have a lot of dependence. And some of the people, I mean, their children and the rest, they would have also been some people, but for the loss of their parents and their relations. When an accident happens and people are crying, I feel for them. Because you can imagine that somebody is in school, the only person who is in charge of paying school fees and the rest is the one who has been taken away by death. And I believe that we can easily avoid such unfortunate death on our road. But I also appeal to the people who have power and control over such traffic on our roads.
Right.
If some of our roads can be upgraded to dual carriage, dualizing them will reduce the incidence of head-on collisions. Again, the security services too should also ensure that people abide by the traffic regulations, because we have speed limits on our roads, but hardly do we go by them. And hardly do you see people being prosecuted for infringing on such rules. So it's unfortunate, because if it had not happened to you before, you will not appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what I would say about it.
Okay. So it's good the minister, deputy minister in charge of this sector has also announced that they intend to dualize that particular road. And I mean, how long did it have to take us, and how many lives? And the accidents that occur there, always claiming in the dozens, double dozens of precious lives. Okay. Brights, what's your issue?
The eco.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's the echo or the eco.
Yeah, the eco-currency.
I was quite intrigued to learn that the government had very rapidly endorsed President Alan Ouattara's decision to, well, he said he was speaking on behalf of YMO as a whole, to change the CFA into the ILCO. I was surprised then to learn very recently this week that the finance and economic ministers finally met, and they completely rejected the decision. First, you probably aware that we have WAMS, which is the English segment of the regional economic bloc, and Ghana is a member of WAMS. We are not a member of the CEFA grouping. So not being a member of that monetary union, and before we had consulted with our allies in WAMS, we rapidly decided to support Alan Ouattara's position. And now, after the English-speaking countries had met, I don't know what is our actual position, but we endorsed the statement that came out that President Alan Ouattara has no authority to unilaterally accept the powers of WAMS to create a currency simply by changing the name of the CFA to the ECO. The process was always very clear. WAMS will ensure that there is convergence. Once there is convergence among the English-speaking countries, we will introduce our currency, common currency, and then there will be a fusion between our common currency and the XOF or the CFA. Ghana, as long as I've been tracking, that's at least a decade, has never met all the convergence criteria, including some of the primary ones, that will make it possible for that currency to come into being, the currency in the English-speaking area to come into being. Now, not having done that, and being willing to accept the unilateral decision to create an ILCO simply by changing the name of the CFA, I believe that in some way we've lost a bit of trust, especially with Nigeria. What is important is the government needs to clarify its position. Are we in support of this unilateral position of the YMO states, or are we with WAMS on this matter? We can't play both sides. And I'm not by any chance saying that I encourage some kind of schism between French-speaking and English-speaking countries. But the attitude of the president of Côte d'Ivoire clearly has riled some of our allies, particularly Nigeria. And there's no doubt that when it comes to this region, our primary foreign policy focus is the relationship between Nigeria and Ghana.
Okay.
So we cannot sacrifice Nigeria for Ivory Coast. That's my point.
All right. Clara, what are you talking about?
No, for me, it has to do with the road accidents. Particularly, I understand that over 2,000 deaths were recorded, lost. Like you said, it's fatiguing to keep talking about it. My firm did some job on analyzing some of the issues on the road traffic. And the issues are I think we've known them for a long time. One, collaboration. we have different institutions in charge of road safety. How do they collaborate? There is very little collaboration if you look at it. The bigger one, resources. And it becomes a bit tiring to keep talking about. We set up institutions, then we don't resource them to undertake what we set them up to undertake. And then we just appoint people into these institutions. And then at the end of the day, you want to ask, so what have we achieved? So it just, yes, now we have the National Road Authority and all of that, but still, where is the collaboration? We have a lot of institutions, the MTTD, the DVLA, the emergency services. How are they collaborating? When you even come in terms of delivering first aid on the spot, it's non-existent. Go to the hospital. So we have very basic issues that I don't know whether we want to keep talking about them, or that I don't know whether we want to solve the problem or we just want to talk about it. Because a lot of the time when you look at the professed policy and what actually happens on the ground, there's a big gap. I think as a people, we have to start addressing our issues rather than merely really talking about them. And
on this matter, including the driver and passenger pedestrian responsibility as well.
Education, that is where the Road Safety Authority could partner with the media. I've always said that for every country, if you have the majority of your people not complying, you are not going to go anywhere with enforcement, because you are going to be spending so much to enforce. So you put in the effort to make sure that the majority comply. Then you have the minority who don't comply, and you have the resources to prosecute the minority, those who don't comply, to serve as deterrents to others. What is the education? In terms of the legal framework, we've done quite a bit on legal framework. Our legal framework for road safety isn't that bad. There are some improvements that we can make, but it is not totally that bad. But look at the legal framework and look at the enforcement. Vast apart. We have speed limits by law. Who enforces speed limits? And how many speed cameras do we have to check who is violating the law and who is not violating the law? We have laws on seat belt, child restraint system, a lot of road safety issues. Who is enforcing them? And if you talk about who is enforcing them, are they well equipped to be able to enforce them? It's another matter. So probably we need to really look at, apart from setting up institutions, we keep talking about this over and over again, resourcing them to do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will now proceed to have lay down the challenges with the current system and why they don't support an upgrade, or why it is almost a useless thing to embark upon, and also waste of money, and why it is that doing a completely new system is the best and will save us in excess of 173 million Ghana cedis. Yes.
Right, Samson, thanks once again. As I was saying before we departed a bit to give our take on some of the topical issues that are occurring in Ghana, I was proceeding to say that the voters register, it's a very critical component of any electoral process, and it is essential that that register is credible and people have faith in it. The only way to do that is to ensure that only the people who are eligible to vote are the people who end up being on that voters list. And I believe that this is what the Electoral Commission has been doing since its inception. Since 2011, the Electoral Commission has used biometrics for creating a biometric list, and then during voting day, we also verify voters using the biometric voter devices. It is important that before we delve into the challenges that we have as a commission with the equipment that we are currently using, we understand the processes that we need to go through before we can create a biometric voters list. Essentially, the reason why the biometrics were chosen was that it affords us to use the physiological features of every human being to create a unique signature that identifies you and is able to differentiate you from me, for example, from Dr. Akweku or Clara for that matter, right? So there are a number of modalities that are used to create those unique biometric signatures. One of them is your fingerprints, 10 fingerprints, or you could use your facial image. More advanced ones are your iris, your retina. These days, people even use your vein pattern, your voice pattern, and even your gait as a form of identification. And that creates that unique signature that is then used to identify you at a later date. This is what law enforcement agencies use worldwide, border control systems, and even in Ghana, we have various biometric systems that are currently available that are being used by SNET, National Health Insurance Authority, etc., passports, DVLE, and all that. It's just so that, it's just because it is a good modality to identify a human being. And that is what
this is what you term as the AFIS.
No, the AFIS is an automated fingerprint identification system that uses only the fingerprints.
Okay.
All right. Now it's upgraded to an ABIS. The B now standing for biometric, because now all the other modalities can be added onto it. Okay, so you can have an ABIS that has facial records, that has iris, that has fingerprints. But typically when it started, it used to be just fingerprints. That's why it was referred to.
Okay, so
as an
let's
ABIS.
proceed.
Right. So for us in Ghana, we've used the biometrics, the fingerprint biometrics, as the basis for our biometric register. And our system is such that, and if you can, I sent an image across, if it can be shown on the screen. The system is such that during the registration process, and anybody who has a voter ID has gone through that process, you walk to a registration officer. Now the registration officer has a kit which we refer to with this acronym BVR, standing for Biometric Voters Registration Kit. Essentially what that constitutes of, it constitutes of a laptop computer, a camera, a fingerprint scanner. And this fingerprint scanner is not just any fingerprint scanner, but a scanner that takes 4 fingers at a time. So we call it a 442. And then a printer together with a secure case. Because mind you, when we go on these registration exercises, we travel across the length and breadth of the country. Sometimes over rivers, we go through boats and all that. So we need a secure case that ensures that even if the kit drops, we still be able to use it.
Okay.
Right? So that's what constitutes it. So typically when you do a registration and you walk up to the registration officer, the process is that you fill a form, you put all your details in it. Then you proceed to take in your biometric data. Now that biometric data is, we capture your face and then we take your 10 fingerprints. When you do that, essentially what happens is, at enrollment, we extract an image of your fingerprint. Now, it is important that that image meets a particular quality. If it doesn't meet that quality, extraction of the image from that quality then will result, extraction of the data from that poor quality image will result in a poor template being created. And it is the template that is used to match on voting day. So one precedes the other. If you have low quality images, the templates that are generated will also be poor. Now we store those templates in a database.
Okay.
Now typically what happens with most vendors who produce these AFISs is that there's a standard that is internationally accepted that you can keep that format in. But in order to make the matching process fast, they tend to convert that format from the images into their own proprietary templates, which they wrap their own algorithms around and therefore make the whole matching process faster. So that is what typically you have most vendors do. So once the templates are stored, on voting day, a voter walks to a polling station and then uses the biometric verification device. Now that device also has a fingerprint sensor, but instead of the big fingerprint sensor that the BVR has, it has just one for a single finger. Now you place your finger on that device and then it matches it against what we already have on the database. Now if it makes a match, essentially it has verified that you are who you say you are. And then you can progress to go and cast your ballots. Right. And that is the simple process. There are lots of other things that happen in between, because mind you, when somebody registers, we keep those templates in a database and we'll match those templates against everybody else who comes to register, so that we are sure that indeed they are only unique individuals that are in that database, ensuring the policy of one man, one vote.
Right.
So what it means is that all my 10 fingers, if I have 17 people on an electoral roll, all my 10 fingers will be matched against all the 10 fingers of all the other 17 million people that are on that electoral
So
roll.
we're trying to get some graphics that Yao has graciously provided us on the screen so that you can follow some of the things that he's talking about a lot more easily. But if you are listening on radio, you can go to My Joy Online right now. Go to My Joy Online, look for the story exclusive. These are the 36 challenges facing the current voters register. Exclusive. These are the 36 challenges facing the current voters register. In that story is attached this slide that you can follow as Yao, takes us, down, trying to understand what is going on. Yes, please go on.
Right. So basically, in a nutshell, that is what our processes are. Now, we need to divide it into various sections in terms of what the actual architecture is. So you have the registration centers, which also double as the polling stations during Voters' Day. Then you have the district centers. So basically what happens is that because a lot of our registrations are done offline, right? At the end of every registration period, it may be a day, maybe a week, we transfer the data that we have collected onto sticks. They then take those USB sticks to the district offices, and then they are loaded from the district offices after some analysis have been done to the central data center which resides in Accra. Now, in order to do that, it means that all the regional or the district offices must be connected to the central database that sits in the EC's headquarters in Accra. And so you have connectivity between all of them, okay? And likewise, allows us to do things in a decentralized manner that we have currently now, and which is one of the challenges that the system had. And I'll take them one by one so that we get a proper view of the issues that the Electoral Commission now has. So these kits that we have, remember what I described to you. They've been in existence since 2011 at least. And they've all reached end of support. Okay, the biometric voter registration kits, that constitutes the laptop, the printer, the fingerprint scanner, they've reached their end of support. Essentially,
which means?
When a manufacturer says that I have reached end of support, essentially what it's saying that I no longer produce the device. I no longer provide support for that device. So you cannot get support from me. You can't get support from other third parties who want to. It's like how in the car industry, they have aftermarket people who produce parts for you.
But it's not exactly
It is
an
not
expiry
exact.
date.
No, essentially what they are saying is that that equipment, as it sits there, you may still use it, but we no longer support it.
Okay. Please proceed.
All right. So they've reached end of support. A large quantity of them too, obviously, if you've been using this thing for 9 years plus, obviously their machines, they will break down. Now, a large number of them have broken down. They have faulty parts. So, in essence, as a kit, we can't use them. What we've also realized is that the batteries have all run down. Remember I said that we do registrations that are offline. We go to riverine areas. We go to far-reaching areas that are difficult to access. Some may not have electricity. So the battery packs are very important. Unfortunately, over the years, those battery packs themselves, like any other device, has also run out.
Okay.
Okay. So the other issues you're having is that gradually the image qualities that you are getting from those sensors are deteriorating. And so it makes the generation of the templates also not the optimum that we would require. And therefore, on Voters' Day, you have issues with verification. We have similar problems with the printers as is. So the BVD kits, they suffer the same problems that we've had with the BVR kits because they also have sensors that have problems associated with them.
We have done some 10 minutes now. If you can spend some 5 more minutes to run quickly through this.
The challenges.
And then get to the new system that you propose.
Right.
And why, it's superior.
Okay.
And why that ought to be the path rather than an upgrade.
Sure.
Can we also get the same amount of time to react?
Not exactly, but we should have sufficient time to deal with it. That's why it is only one issue discussion
today. All right. So remember I mentioned about the network systems, right? The network systems were based on a technology that is called VSAT. It's akin to your DSTV or your GoTV and all those satellite-based. In 2011, it was an okay technology, all right? But as we gradually moved from an offline system to an online system, we realized that that system was not able to support our needs. Because during registration processes, if there's rainfall or cloud cover, essentially the district offices are cut off. And you remember during the limited registration exercise, there was a lot of complaints about the system being offline. And it was purely because the VSAT systems were simply not able to cope with the amount of traffic that we were pushing across the network. Quite apart from that too, the servers and the design of the system itself inherently had a lot of problems.
Okay.
It wasn't something that was, if you like, a solution that was built. It was parts that were put together. We had different people who had put those parts together. So we had an ABIS or an AFIS system. We had parts that were developed by people from Israel. Others came from Netherlands and a few other places. So even when there were problems, trying to troubleshoot that problem was a nightmare, because you had to keep bouncing from one person to the other, and a simple issue could take about 3 days for you to solve.
All right.
So essentially, we had quite a number of issues that we had. Paramount amongst them was the fact that even within the data center, all the equipment that we had there had reached end of service as well.
End of service?
Yes. All of them, with the exception of a few that had been just introduced.
What does end of service mean?
So there's end of life and there's end of service.
Okay.
End of service, like I said, essentially means that the parts are no longer available. The person who manufactured the device is telling you that I no longer make them again.
Okay.
So I can't even produce them for you if you want them. All right. And some of them had their service support and warranty levels expiring as far back as 2014.
Okay.
Okay.
All
so
right.
during the process, and it's important that we highlight these things, during the process of the limited registration exercise, for instance, we had problems with servers going down, that we now had to struggle to find parts to keep them up just so that we could get a registration process going. We ended up having to cannibalize certain systems so that we could take the parts out to put into those devices to keep them running just for the registration process to go on.
Okay.
All right. So, and it's the same thing we did with the BVR kits. The BVR kits, those parts that we found that were working, we took from some devices and put into the other device just to make sure that it worked.
Okay.
So those are some of the issues that we had, in addition to the other operational issues with regards to, for instance, the EC staff not being trained onto the system. They had no clue what was going on.
Even though you had signed a contract to have them trained,
it was never
they were
done.
not trained.
There was no,
so you didn't have staff
no
who could
knowledge
handle these
at all.
Okay.
There was no knowledge transfer.
Right.
We didn't know what was going on. Everything was being handled by...
So now quickly justify the new system and why it's superior.
So basically, when we looked at all the failure rates that were going on, the problems that we were encountering, the vendor then themselves came and said that we can upgrade the system for you and refurbish the system. Okay? So the obvious question is that, okay, despite all the problems that we are having, how much is it going to cost to do it? So we brought a bill, which was looked at, and we felt that this bill, just to refurbish and replace broken down equipment, didn't make sense. So an independent consultant...
How much are we talking about?
The bill that they brought was about 56 million.
56 million Ghana cedis.
US dollars.
US dollars, okay.
Yes. And that included rebuilding or sort of upgrading the data center, replacing DVR kits, DVD devices, and not just an upgrade. For some of them, it was just going to be a refurbishment of those ones that could be refurbished.
All right.
And then giving us new parts. So the commission looked at the figures that had been given and thought that they were too high. So an independent consultant who was incidentally involved in 2011 for the design of this current system that we had was brought in and looked at the figures and did a new system design together with a new architecture and looked at the price using market surveys and realized that the price that was being asked for a refurbishment and an upgrade was far in excess of us acquiring a new one. Mind you, with all the difficulties that we had with this current one.
And what is the estimate or the amount we are talking about here, which helps you for the new one rather than going to upgrade?
So I believe that the figure that was arrived at was somewhere in the region of about $36 million.
$36 million.
I need to confirm, yes,
okay.
That's about.
Right.
Okay. So it was important.
You are two of you here, so it's not difficult confirming things.
Yeah. So looking at that, because mind you that the system that us was designed, if we were going to upgrade, we couldn't go anywhere else. Because the system itself was proprietary. We didn't have access to source codes, for instance, even if we wanted to change anything. And so if we had to go through the upgrade path, essentially meant that we had to stick with whoever it is that was
right.
there. And that's the essence of it, upgrade and refurbishment.
And that would have cost the state
exactly
$56 million United States dollars.
Thereabouts.
Okay.
So
and that your decision is that you reject that and rather prefer to spend $36 million US dollars for a brand new enhanced system.
Exactly.
Okay.
So mind you that the brand new system comes with its own advantages. All right. In essence, we had learned from our mistakes.
Okay.
So in prescribing a new system, we wanted to ensure that whatever new system was put in place was a system that would not suffer the same deficiencies that the old system had.
Right.
So for instance, we decided that we were going to decouple the various components of the systems that made up the BMS.
You'll have to pause in a minute.
Okay. So for instance, we decided that we're going to take the transmission away and give it to the telcos. That is their core business. They do it the best. Let them do it. The data center, give it to somebody who actually is core business is building data centers and maintaining them. Give it to them. The biometric voter management systems. There are people who that's their forte. That's what they do.
Right.
Release a tender out, give it to them, and let them give us the best solution that we want based on our requirements, not what somebody wants to give to us.
All right, thank you very much. You're still here on Newsfile, and this certainly is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And you just heard Yao Ofori-Adjei, who is IT consultant to the Electoral Commission, giving us why we don't need the old system, why we have to jettison that completely, because as they use in their own terms, some of the components have become completely useless. And let's now hear from Bright Simmons. And Bright Simmons also, as I announced earlier, represents the 18 civil society organizations that attended a session organized by the Electoral Commission. And Yao here took them through the issues and, you know, all the points that he has gone through with us now, and even more. But they came out of that meeting issuing a long statement rejecting the EC's path to 2020 elections. So, Bright, listening to him, it does appear that there is no option, and that really the only option is what the EC has put on the table.
So you are absolutely right that the 18 CSOs represents, as far as I'm concerned, one of the broadest institutional spectrums we have in this country, from activists through all the way through to research-based organizations. It's quite obvious that they will not take this stance if the matters did not strike them as extremely important, and that their position as bulwarks against the misuse of public funds, the abuse of administrative privilege and discretion was not extremely strong. And I will go over the 5 major reasons why we disagree with almost everything that the EC has said. Almost everything. So 1, we are now in January 2020, right? The EC published a tender in April 2019. In fact, the tender has ended, and I presume they've done some evaluations, because it's now been, what, 7 months or more? Actually, 9 months. Now, if you've gone ahead, published a tender, that presumes you spent at least, I know the civil service fairly well. I've been following it now for a decade and a half. The civil service in Ghana does not publish a tender unless you spend at least 3 months in preparation. I suspect they spent at least 4 months in preparation. So as far back as December, they had decided they wanted a new system. as far as I'm concerned, they are currently engaged purely in a PR exercise to legitimize a decision they've already taken. Because there's no consultation. You don't decide in December 2018 when you abrogated the existing contract, did your research and published your tender, which nobody has seen. So we don't know what the expression of interest was, which then led to the request for proposal. If you are in the media house, you are in Joy FM, one of the leading ones. Have you seen this expression of interest?
No, I have not.
Have you seen the request for proposals?
I have not, but we have been assured the last meeting with them Friday that we will be part of the process through and through.
It's been 8 months. Good. So nobody in this country, in civil society, in media, have an idea what is the research that has led to this outcome? Who are the people that were consulted? In fact, even as he was speaking, my very good friend here, very often I realized that he was not willing to mention names, etc. And I'll go through them one by one. So first, what we are engaged here now is a public relations exercise to legitimate the decision that's already been taken. Second, it's a focus on procurement as opposed to problem solving. So I call it the PMP model. Public relations and procurement. That's where we are now, as far as I'm concerned. And everything I've listened to has reinforced that point. So that's our first problem with the issue situation. The second problem we have, and here I'll use an analogy, it's like a new CEO of Barclays comes into office and he says, we need a new branchless banking system. So I'm going to uproot the entire branchless banking system and implement a new one. Or a new CEO of Surfline comes into office and he says, we need a new telecom network. So what I want is I want to go out there, uproot the entire system and replace it with a new one. Our argument that this architecture is multi-component. It's not entirely true that the system as it was designed cannot be separated as far as vendor design is concerned. We've looked at architecture from HSB, identification, the Dutch company. We've looked at architecture from Genki. We've looked at the STL integration formats. There is every reason why, if we have problems with specific components for it, if we want to upgrade an ABIS, if we want to do some of these things, we can go to Genki as an example and work with Genki alone, because even though they were a consortium, that contract had been abrogated, there has been sufficient time, if we wanted to deal with the independent actors that were involved, to deal with them. Suprema supplied us with fingerprint scan device and the rest of them. I know people in Suprema who will be very happy to have a consultation around BVDs and the rest. And I'll go into most of those details as we proceed. So number two, if you have a network, and that's what it is, it's a network. You've got your BVR systems. Some of them are basically a laptop connected with peripherals. You've got your AB system in a data center. You've got the individual device and operating systems that are on them. For instance, Mr. J points out that when it comes to most of these systems, they are proprietary. Yes, the Windows on your computer is proprietary. And the Windows on that device is proprietary. But it's nothing that stops you from dealing with Microsoft when it comes to that device, because Windows is owned by Microsoft. Nobody, HSB, Genki, and the rest cannot control Windows and say, because it's on our system, you have no right to go to the actual vendor of Windows and deal with them. Linux, Red Hat, and the like belong to other vendors, and there's a room if we want to upgrade, for instance, operating systems on those devices to go directly to vendors, etc. So I don't get that argument at all, and we'll go into them in greater detail. So to summarize that point, you don't uproot, stem, branch a system that is that elaborate and hope to implement a whole new system as opposed to incremental upgrades and surgical upgrades where it's most important. And that's our second point. Our third point is that this system actually has been undergoing continuous upgrades and procurement since 2011. I couldn't believe it when he said to me that now the device started in 2011 and that was the end of it. I couldn't believe it. The degree of candor we need in public service means that if you know we had procurements in 2016, and there were some of the machines dated from 2015 and the like, you need to mention it. It's incumbent on public authorities and public servants to be extremely candid. So you don't tell us that, oh, the devices started in 2011, when we know, because I have read all your budgets. I've read every medium-term expenditure framework, and I've seen all your procurement plans and the likes, and I know that you've continued to buy equipment. In the Charlotte Osei affair, we saw the documents that were provided that showed that STL had made offerings to replace some of these equipment. In fact, the EC had gone ahead to do a procurement, which he had cancelled and then abrogated their contract and renegotiated down. So we know those numbers. So we know what was purchased, we know what was offered, we know the pricing, and everything that Mr. J has told us today is in variance with that record. So that's the third point, which is that we're making continuous purchases over time, including the VSATs that he mentioned. We've had procurement budgets to implement VSAT. Every time we have a new district, we need to implement a new VSAT. And some of those new districts have the VSATs. So clearly they must have bought some new VSATs. So it can't be that everything was bought in 2011. That's the third point. The fourth point we have is that Mr. J makes interesting references to error rates. And that discussion can get extremely technical. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I can. And that is this. The key error rates in these matters that we've been apprised of is this issue of the false rejection rate. So your fingerprint is in the database and was properly captured, but somehow when you put your finger on the BVD, it says no. And I understand that the proxy for measuring the false rejection rate in this country is the manual verification. So if you attempt to do it and it doesn't work, they do a manual verification. He can explain to us if that is not a good proxy. If the false rejection rate is reasonably approximated by the manual verification process, and they have themselves told us that they do it at 0.64% false rejection rate, the question that the point that every Ghanaian needs to understand is twofold. One is that the false rejection rate is dependent on the false acceptance rate. It's a calibration, it's a two-sided calibration equation. If you increase the false acceptance rate threshold, you improve the false rejection rate threshold. Why? If you tell the system that if the thing doesn't look perfectly like it, reject it, then what it means is that for some people that are truly registered, maybe the image was slightly degraded at edges or something like that, it will reject it as well. So part of that calibration process in our control, we have the means by doing some of the calibration to take policy decisions. Why? Because you cannot have 100% matching rates. It's theoretically impossible. I have looked at all the vendor testing for NIST. You know, they do a competition where they invite multiple vendors to come in and demonstrate their technology. I've looked at the last 3 or so, and I never saw a 100% matching rate. In that situation as well, we have a single index finger approach. So when you do the actual BVD verification, you are doing one finger at a time. Yes, it's true that when you are enrolling, you use multiple fingers. But when you are doing the verification on the day, my understanding is there's a single index approach. Typically, a single index approach reduces some of your accuracy because it's the whole set of fingers prints together that increases the accuracy rate. Now, my argument is that if you are doing, let's say, a false acceptance rate of a certain degree, we can look at comparative systems elsewhere and benchmark what is their error rate. And I'll give you only 2. One of the key NIST competitions in recent times set the false acceptance rate to 0.1%, and they got a false rejection rate at 1.97%, significantly above our 0.64%. So it means that when you say that unless, for the people that are likely not to be through, only 0.1% of them should pass through, it increases the people who, even though it is true, the system rejects. And we know that because I've looked at the EKTP system in Indonesia very closely. That's the mandatory ID system in Indonesia. And where they set the system to 0.01%, it increases the false rejection rate to 3%. So the question is, you have to do calibration, and that process is a policy process. Somebody has to tell us what is today the false acceptance rate that we are using to calibrate it. That says that, okay, for people that are potentially not the right people, allow it through. What is that rate? It will impact the false rejection rate. And until we are told that, any numbers they give us is not really relevant. The second point I want to make is that to the extent that we have a system that is not 100% right, our way of determining whether we are improving or we are getting worse is to look at the conduct of the elections themselves. In 2012, when we first used the biometric protocol in the world, we were the first in the world in using biometric validation at the electoral polls. And the reason we were was that the Kenyans abandoned theirs, and they had a huge corruption scandal around their procurement for BVDs and BVRs, where the amount of money they were mentioning is like some of the amount of monies that we've been told the vendors proposed to use. They abandoned that. And subsequently, what then happened is that they did not use it. And so we used it in 2012. And as far as every literature that I have reviewed is concerned, we were the first in the world. It was a newer system, right? It was a completely new system. Okay. Our failure rates then, in 2012, were the worst we've seen to date. Part of that is purely maturity issues. The more you use the system, the better it gets. Why am I saying it was the worst we saw? Because it was the only election in the last couple of years where we had failures to the point where we needed to postpone the election to the next day. You remember those days? 33% problem, 33% of polling stations had problems. And we had to postpone the election to the next day. We've subsequently not seen those kind of problems to the same degree. So every relevant indicator, from number of rejected ballots, etc., percentage of rejected ballots, etc., show that there have been improvements in terms of the management of the election with the same BVMS. So if we want to use the end of, if we want to use the actual conduct of the elections as an example, then it shows that though the technology may be getting somewhat obsolete over time, at the same time, maturity in managing them is also improving, and they are balancing out. So it's an empirical point what you do around it. Last point, and that's our most important point. There's been a whole bunch of proposed costs that they've given. When he says to you that it's $56 million, you have to ask them, is that $56 million the result of a tender where the least, the lowest bidding proponent or the lowest bidder gave you $56 million? Where are you getting that number from? They claim that they wrote to the vendor, the integrator, STL, and the STL talked to HSB. And then having done that, they came to them with some numbers. Nobody has seen those letters. We don't know the context in which they were delivered. They said there was refurbishment, that was there. We don't know the extent of refurbishment. We don't know anything. But the point is that that's not how you do things in the civil service. If you really want to do price benchmarking, do an RFQ process, not an RFP full tender. Just request for quotations from the 50 or so vendors that I have been tracking all around the continent, supplying the service all over. There's Demalog in this country. There is Laxton Group that just won in Zimbabwe, etc. If you do that kind of proper benchmarking study, as I have done, and as a lot of the people in the civil society research segment have done, you find out that the cost that you are saying is reasonable. It's actually very high. It's actually very high. So we know from 2005, when DRC got $2,500 per BVR kit, that's 2005, that over time, electronic costs go down. And it wasn't surprising that in 2010, Benin managed to do a procurement where the cost of the devices, even though the quantity was far lower than DRC, was still 2,700. And if you do that adjustment, it was then lower, based on volume. 2011, Sierra Leone, 2008, $2,800. Most intriguingly, Kenya 2017, look at the cost of the BVR solution, less than $750, because they're using the MOFO tablets, which is a completely new generation solution. So even if the EC claims that it needs to do a mass replacement exercise, the cost that you are proposing is nothing interesting.
I see. Right, so Bright Simmons, they're raising some quite...
Can I respond to this?
Yes, you would respond. And I see that you have taken note of a number of the issues that have been raised. And remember that we're having a holistic discussion, focusing on the issues so that you can make, an independent judgment for yourself, whether or not the EC's proposed approach is the best or not. I'll go to Dr. Strebo and Clara as well. Of course, Yaweje Foreje has noted some points that he wants to react to. But because we are doing a holistic discussion and are asking questions, how much has this country sunk into the national identification system? Why is it that that is not the path to generating the data that all other government institutions that want to use it would, as it were, pipe into that system? There are others who have also asked the question. In fact, the National Identification Authority itself has claimed that nobody in this country has legal authority to collect biometric data except the National Identification Authority. We'll seek to answer all of these questions. And joining us to deal with that aspect of the discussion is Professor Ken Atefa. So, Prof, thank you very much for joining us on Newsfile.
Thank you very much, Samson, and good morning to your panelists and to your listening public.
Okay, so we understand that you are on the field and you are doing some work, so we need to deal with you now so you can move on and then we continue with our discussion. So the question that's being asked... I
really appreciate your indulgence.
Right, the question that's being asked is that you and the EC were supposed to have worked together. EC is doing its own, DVLA is doing its own, SNIT is doing its own, everybody else is capturing people's biometric. This doesn't happen anywhere. You have captured so far over 6 million Ghanaians on your system, and your system is supposed to be multi-purpose. I was one of the lucky ones to have registered the very first time when you started. On a day, in less than 30 minutes, I got my ID card, hoping that I could use that to vote as well. What's going on?
Samson, thank you very much. you've said quite a few things. Let me address them systematically. First of all, NIA and EC are not at war. We are not at loggerheads. We are two institutions, separate and independent, but very conscious of the obligation of state institutions to ensure interagency coordination, harmonization, and collaboration as necessary and appropriate. And I can assure you that we have had significant engagements that have enabled us to understand quite clearly the areas of responsibilities and, of course, the areas of overlap as they impinge on the work that we have to do. I think that recent comments by some officials of the EC with respect to NIA being not time-bound and its data not being able to be relied upon have kind of bit unfortunate, and I think muddying the waters a little bit. What has to be understood, and I've also seen a bit of headlines from a press conference I granted in Takrady yesterday, the caption of which also tends to confuse the picture a bit. Let me clarify a few.
Yes, and we do need you to clarify that, because I need to state this, that why is the EC not justified, for example, to not be interested in working with you at this time? You have spent 2 years in collecting 6.5 million, and the EC has 17 million plus to work with, and it has to do that in less than a year. How can it rely on you when you have spent 2 years taking only 6 million?
Okay, so that's all wrong. Just let me set it out properly for you. Number one, the law obliges NIA to undertake a mass registration exercise. That mass registration exercise is time-bound. The mass registration exercise started on the 29th of April 2019. Today is the 18th of January 2020. So that's not 2 years. The 2 years that you have in mind, I believe, it's a calculation deriving from when we did a liveness test of the technical system that we had inherited from the old Ghana card system, the technical system that we then expanded and used it to issue a card, a biometric ID card, to President Akufo-Addo on the 15th of September 2017.
Okay.
Since that time, we have done institutional registration and community registrations in Lankwantana, Medina, and those places, which enabled us to pilot. It was a piloting of the new expanded system in order to position it, to fine-tune and get us ready. We got ready and started on the 29th of April for the mass registration. At the time of starting Samson, we required under contract, there's a public-private partnership arrangement that is being used to pursue this Ghana card project. Now, at the time of starting, we required by our design 2,500 registration kits. Unfortunately, by the time we started, we had only 1050 machines. Hence, the fewer registration centers and the long queues and all the agonies that Ghanaians went through. Now, in the course of our work across the regions, government enabled us, having fulfilled the conditions precedent and having moved one of the conditions precedent into a condition subsequent. Government then enabled NIA to acquire all the 2,500 registration kits that it needed to begin with, and also getting additional 3,192 registration kits. All these things came together by the time we're just about to enter the Ashanti region. So now we have a strengthened, a highly invigorated registration capacity. And so in Ashanti region, we were able to open 833 registration centers instead of the 350 registration centers that we did in Volta region, Uchi, Savannah, Northeast, Northern, Upper East, Upper West, Bono East, and Ahapu, and all of that. Now we have a better capacity. We have 15,000 workers out there sacrificing, going beyond the call of duty, and delivering the Ghana Card project. So right now, as I speak to you, we have gone beyond the figures that you were talking about. If you look at our performance within the last month in Ashanti region, as we speak, we have registered, as of yesterday, 7,301,193 Ghanaians. So the enrollment figure is 7,301,193, out of which we have issued cards to 4,262,471. We do have a backlog of some 565,030 cards to issue, and we have about 415,000 cards that are awaiting decisions because of various challenges with sometimes discrepancies between people's pre-existing data and the kind of data that they are submitting to us. So, but the assurance, the key thing is this: the enrollment that we are doing, it captures all the biometrics that the EC requires. So just a minute, please. It captures the iris, it captures the fingerprints, and it also captures the facial. All the things and all the biographic details that the EC could ever want. NIA is collecting all those things. The only thing that the EC needs, which the NIA doesn't take, is polling station number of polling station name. But that is as easy as ABC to get with technology. It is not a problem at all. It means that as of today, NIA can push to EC the data sets of all those Ghanaians, the 7-point-something million Ghanaians, who have been registered and who are above 18 years. Indeed, as of now, about 94 to 95% of all the persons on the NIA register, the enrollment, the National Identity Register, about 94 to 95% are persons aged 18 and above, or who will be 18 and above by the time of voting. With a click of a button, you can push all that data set to EC, which can easily, with technology, add the polling station codes or numbers to them.
Very interesting, Prof. Very interesting, Prof. So that you say ultimately that the NIA has what the EC needs and that it is able to deliver for what the EC needs for 2020 elections. Is that what you say?
What I'm saying is the NIA is poised to deliver. The NIA is on course. With its invigorated capacity, the mass registration exercise is scheduled to end by the end of March 2020.
Okay.
When that is over, we will use the equipment and the personnel who have gained experience and all of that to set up by end of March permanent NIA officers in the regions, municipalities, and districts across the length and breadth of this country.
Do me a favor. Do me a favor and hold on briefly for me. Let me bring in Dr. Srebo to ask you this question.
Yes.
Because as I understand from the EC, and I've asked, and the EC chairperson herself has explained that if there had been collaboration, and you had commenced the process on polling or constituency basis, it would have made it easier for them to be able, as it were, to tap into what you're using to progress the system rather than saddling the nation with yet 36 million to produce a new system. How is this the major problem why you are unable to use NIA's data. Let him hear so he can respond.
Thank you, my brother. I think we have been saying that our activities are time-bound. Time-bound here means that we cannot go beyond probably June. And
NIA will be done in March. You are beginning in April.
Something, a correction, please. NIA will be done with a mass registration in March. NIA, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, NIA will be done with a mass registration in March. The mass registration started before this conversation started about whether you could use polling stations and all of that. Let us remember that the NIA is a creator of statutes.
That's right.
It obeys its laws.
Yes.
Its law does not require it.
Yes, but from your explanation, by March you are done with the mass registration, and the data is available for the EC.
We will do the remainder of the population through our permanent officers and the co-location with our cognate institutions such as EC itself, SNET, DVLA,
and what is the timeline for you on that? When do you expect to end that?
We expect to end all of these activities before June, or by the end of June.
By the end of June. Okay. So thank you, Prof. Just give us a few minutes. Let's hear him, and then you respond to him. Yes, Dr. Shrebo.
Yeah. So like I was talking of, we are bound by time, and our register should be ready by the end of June. That is the worst we can, so that we can have time for exhibition. We cannot go beyond September when it comes to nomination. That's why we have been emphasizing. Now,
and so I can quickly add that for us, we are capturing people aged between age from 15 and about 15 to infinity. It means that by the June that he's talking about, or perhaps even earlier, EC can extract the voter register from the national identity database, because we have people from age 15 and above.
Okay, thank you.
So by that time, it is easy to extract it.
Right,
and
thank you.
The technology is easily available for that purpose.
Thank you very much. If you could let him finish. Yes, yeah. Doc.
So our register should be ready by that time. So let us assume that if their data is ready by March, let us assume, it will mean that we have to allocate the polling stations to the various people who have been registered. Because the choice of where to vote is the individual's choice, not me or anybody. So if the data is there by that time, we will have to go to the polling station and ask those people who have been registered to come with their ID cards. So they will then go to where they want to vote with ID cards. Then we can now compare the ID numbers. Then we go back to them for them to extract the various data for the various polling stations.
And that presupposes that they have the ID cards.
Sorry, say that.
I mean, that presupposes that they have the
ID card by that time.
That's what I'm getting to.
All right.
So they will have to go with the ID card, because you cannot just come there and say that I'm a registered person with the NIA. So we are thinking that, looking at their speed. Now, from what he is saying, if I got him right, is that they have covered about 7 million.
Right.
And we are thinking of around 17 million. So we realize that they have not been covered half.
No, you see, he's saying that this is when they are now invigorated. They have received their 2,500 plus, kit that they need. And so they went into Kumasi, and within a short time, they have done a lot of work. So you can expect that now they are running with such speed that he assures you that by June, they would have completed the most important part that you need to finish up on the process that they are doing now.
See, we are not at war with anybody.
Correct.
But if I got him right, about 4 million people have gotten the ID card.
That's so.
So when are they? If they have registered 7.3, and only 4.2 have gotten the ID card, and we will need the ID card. So the issue is that we are not comfortable with respect to when those data will be available.
Okay.
And you see, compiling register like they are talking of, it's a very tedious work. Anybody in the electoral commission will be happy that the data is ready, then we just extract what we want, and we can easily slip. But we are talking of, we have no opportunity to avoid conducting election in December.
Okay, let's have Prof finish up and then take leave of us. So, Prof, you heard what he just said.
Yes. Yes, I did.
You won't have the
except
cards ready by then, and they will need people to come to the polling.
All those cards that have not been issued will be issued. All those cards, because we have the capacity, we are now. I mentioned the additional 3,192 machines. It means that we have the capacity to go back and let people assist. And let people get their cards across the country. That's number one. Number two, to do the kind of verification he's talking about, because we have people's 3 levels of biometrics, facial, fingerprint, and iris. When a person shows up, even without the Ghana card, even without the physical card, because all their biometrics are there, just putting a finger on a reader, on a biometric reader, will bring up the data to confirm the identity of the person on a one-to-one matching or on a one-to-many matching, both offline and online. Offline registration verification is available right now. Online registration will be available by end of March.
Okay.
Delivered, complete. And so all of these matters that have been thought through, the conversations that we've had with EC, we got to a point, there was a conversation I wasn't part of and Mrs. Jimenta wasn't part of. But I think that when we have a chance to look at these technical issues, the mechanics of it, the science is there, the willpower is there, the desire to save the nation money and to save people the agony, all of these things are solid. And with a little bit more interagency cooperation and harmonization, we will solve it. The point I'm making is, no, there's a difference between issuing a card, which is an EC mandate, and NIA doesn't have anything to do with that.
All right.
But the construction of the database is something that NIA is doing.
That's understood.
EC is at liberty.
That's understood.
To take that database and extract its voter register from that, and we will deliver so that EC can get the job done if it is inclined to doing so.
Professor Tefa, thank you very much for your time. We leave you here so you return to the field to do this job. And I'm asking you, Doc, when he says that they have done 7.3 million and they have in excess of 4 million cards in people's hands, are you not better off starting with that than you now beginning the process, fresh? You have 4 million to start with.
The 4 million out of
17 that you expect.
That is the problem. What I'm saying that anybody in the Electoral Commission will go to sleep and know that there's not going to go through the tedious work of compiling new register if the NIA issued it. I'm part of the technical team that made them. And when we had the interaction, we realized that if we are to wait for the NIA, then what it will mean is that we are not going to have a register for the exhibition and the nomination and the election. That is why we said that, well, in that case, maybe in future when they are set, we can rely on their data. But for this year, 2020, we may be taking the risk of not getting the register if you are to depend on them.
Okay.
That's why we go out.
I have to go on a break, but when I return, one of the questions I'll be asking you is, so why not pause, do an upgrade and manage, because you have the hope that you have an NIA who is going to complete the process. And we understand that when the new EC came into office, there was already, a contract to do an upgrade. And that was supposed to be for 56 million Ghana cedis. Ghana cedis. No, that's the emphasis.
That one was specifically
Ghana
for the referendum.
For the referendum.
Exactly.
And after the referendum, what was required was buying a few kits here and there to add on, and then you would take care of 2020 elections. So when I come, I'd like to know why you cannot pause to do that and then wait for NIA to finish, then everybody else, pipes into NIA. But before we take the break, let's have Clara give us 3 minutes of your thoughts. No, when we come back, you're going to talk.
Then let's
of your
come
thoughts,
back.
having listened to everybody.
No.
Okay, so if that's what you prefer,
if
that's what you prefer, then we take a break and return now. So viewers and listeners, as I already announced earlier, you can contribute and you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the appropriate time. And we will announce the contact details that you will have access to ask your questions shortly. These are the numbers that you can use to get to us and then ask your questions subsequently. So you can call us, not now, I will tell you when to call, but just take note of these numbers: 030-211-701, 0302-211-701, 0302-211-702, 0302-211-703, and 0302-211-704. So from 701 up to 704. The number is 0302-211-70124. I'll tell you when to call, and we have some of your questions also. And the EC is here, and Bright Simmons, Clara, yet to have a take, are all here. We'll be right back after this break.